In this video we're going to be creating a volume that the player enters in order to set in motion that the level has been completed. Up to this point we have two states, which one state is kind of gets things set up and the other state is the actual playing. This will eventually lead to our third and last state, but for now we won't worry about that. That'll be the next video. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this portal volume, so to speak, which will, when the player collects enough objectives and enters this volume, it'll tally up points, pretty much do everything that needs to be done in order to move on to the next level. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a base class for the volume. We're going to call that class PuzVolume, and it's going to extend from volume. And we've been setting up a lot of these base classes, and you may be wondering, why are we doing it since there really isn't any code in here? Well, it's because it's kind of a good way of making sure that you give yourself the opportunity to add code that that can affect all those volumes that you're creating if you feel like there's a need for that. Now, if you're definitely positive there's no way that you are ever going to need to do this, then obviously you could probably skip this step and have the PuzVolume_portal extend from volume. But by doing this, it doesn't really hurt the game any. It doesn't create a whole lot of extra files or anything like that. So it's not going to make your game bigger to any extent by creating a base class. And in the end, it could also be very helpful because you'll have it ready in case if there is something you wanted to change or add. Okay, so we're going to create this first class called PuzVolume, and it extends from volume. Once we're done with that, once again, we aren't adding anything in here. We're just going to move on to the next volume. And we're going to have class PuzVolume_portal extends from PuzVolume, and it's going to be placeable because we need to make sure that the person who's making the maps can place this volume into the game. We're going to have a variable particle system component called portalParticle, which is going to actually be used to modify the particle that we created down here in default properties that we've attached to this volume. We have two events that we're going to be overloading. We have an event called touch and an event called untouch. Pretty self-explanatory. Touch means as soon as an actor touches it, it sets this event in motion, and untouch is as soon as they walk out of it and they're no longer touching it, it sets that in motion. Inside of the event, we're going to have a local PuzPawn, which is called PuzP, and a local PuzPlayerController called PuzPC. We also are going to use super.touch, and then you pass in the exact same parameters that are being used. As you can see, other and other comp, hit location, and hit normal. And you pass those exact same ones in. What this does is this carries all the code from previous classes forward into this event. When it comes to events, you're going to probably use super just about all of the time. When it comes to functions, you may find yourself sometimes using it, sometimes not using it. If you didn't use super.touch here, there's a very good chance this event won't work, and on top of that, there's also a good chance that if it does work, it'll be extremely buggy. Okay, so we're going to then set the PuzPawn to the actor that's touching it. So PuzP will equal PuzPawn other, so we're going to typecast that in, which means, once again, that if the other is not of a PuzPawn, this will return none. So PuzP will equal none if it isn't of a PuzPawn. And we're also going to set PuzPC equals PuzPlayerController, and then PuzP.owner. So once again, if it's not a PuzPawn, it's going to return none, and also if it's a PuzPawn and it's not a player controller or a PuzPlayerController, it's going to return none in this area. So these are important for making sure that we are only changing things for that certain particular thing, or person, or player, or it could be the bot, even the AI. You may want to just manipulate something that happens to the AI. So that's what this is for. So we're going to pinpoint that. So the first thing we're going to check is we're going to say if PuzP is not equal to none. So that obviously, if that checks okay, then we move on to the player controller. If that's not equal to none, then we do the following code. Now you may ask, why would we do this, since if the pawn is already none, then it wouldn't really matter much? Well, the reason is because this allows us now to, if we wanted to, we could change some code inside of this if statement. So in other words, let's say later the AI, if they walk into this portal, we want them to die instantly. We could set that up because obviously the AI are probably going to be PuzPawns as well. Um, but then we don't want them, however, to activate the portal. So there's, it kind of goes either way. You may find yourself saying, well, I'm not going to do that anyway. And in that case, you could probably get by with just the if pus pc is not equal to none. Okay, now that we're inside of this if statement, we're going to do two things. First, we're going to set the portal particle to active, so we're going to turn it on, and we're also going to tell the pus pc that they are inside of a portal, which is a boolean that we just created, which we'll get to in a second. Matter of fact, let's just jump over there real quick since it's real easy just to add it in. We'll jump over to the pus player controller, and up at the top, we're just going to do a variable bool be in portal. That's all we're going to do. It's not going to. It's going to. In case if you didn't know, if you don't set a boolean in the game in default properties, if you don't set it to something initially, it's automatically set to false. Integers are automatically sent to 0. There's a lot of things like that that are automatically defaulted to something. Okay, so we're going to jump back to the portal. Now, next we're going to go down to untouch. Same situation here, everything gets set up the same way, and then when we get inside, we're just going to set things to false. So if the player leaves the volume, we're going to turn off the particle. So it's going to run its course, and then it's going to kind of vanish. And then also the be in portal, we want to set that to false as well. Now, what's going to happen is let's say the character's walking around, he hasn't collected all his objectives yet, but he walks on top of the portal. Well, the portal's going to activate and say, hey, look at me, I'm right here. Well, then the player leaves, and at this point, the player knows where the portal is. He's found it. So it kind of throws in another puzzle. Not only does the player have to run around a maze and collect these objectives, and he also needs to find the portal. Now, on top of that puzzle is the fact of, do we tell the player how many objectives he needs in order to complete the maze? In this situation, in this game we're creating, we're not going to tell the player. So the player not only needs to run around the maze and collect the pieces, he also needs to double check every time he gets enough pieces, can he move on to the next level? Now, in default properties, we're going to also add a particle system component, and we're going to call it particle sys1. You can call it whatever you want. Just remember, if you use a different name, you have to change it down here as well. Template equals particle system class content dot particle system dot portal particle, which is the name of the actual item in our content pack. We're going to set be auto activate to false because we want to make sure it does not turn on right away. If we set this to true, it would already be shooting out and showing itself, and giving itself away. We don't want that to happen. Then we're going to have an end object, and then we're also going to set the portal particle to equal this attached object, this attached particle system component, which is what we talked about before. Now we can use portal particle, which we are doing, to actually change things of this particle system. Finally, we're going to do components.add, so we're going to add this object to the class to make sure that when we do create volumes of this portal, it does have this particle system with it. Next, we have b static equals false and b hidden equals false. Now, if we had b hidden equals true, then and b static equals false, what's going to happen is the particle system is going to run its course, but it's never going to show up in the game. B hidden is whether this should show up inside the game. If we had b static equals true and b hidden equals false, it wouldn't work because we wouldn't be able to even turn the particle system on in this way. We would have to do it a different way, because by using static, it doesn't allow you to manipulate things as easily. So we're going to set b static equals false, and we're going to set b hidden equals false. So not only are we going to be able to manipulate things easier inside this volume, we're also going to be able to show it in the game as well. Why would you set b static to true? Well, because what if you wanted it to be static? You didn't want things to move. You didn't want things to change. And a lot of times when you're making a volume, you don't really want things to change or move. So, that's pretty much why it's usually by default true. Okay, now the last thing we're going to do is we're going to jump inside of the puz game, and we're going to add one more thing to the actual objective, so to speak, when we do our if statement to see if the level's been completed. We have puzPlayer.objective counter is greater than or equal to objective amount required. So right now we're just making sure the player does actually collect more or equal to the amount required to move on to the level. And then we're going to throw in this AND operand, which is going to basically say that these conditions need to be met in order to say the level's completed level. And that is basically saying PUZPlayer.be in portal. So if the player has all the objectives and he's inside the portal, the level is now complete, and we can then move on to whatever's supposed to happen at that point. And that completes this video.